Let's move on to the next one. That's Ryan Porteous. So we're looking at kind of defenders now. A few of the guys we're going to talk about the rest of the podcast have had injury problems. Ryan Porteous is one of them. Has obviously had some knee issues at the start of the season and got over them, but then got another kind of bad knee injury back in December, back in January, and hasn't really played since then. A really good prospect. A lot of people saying that he was kind of worthy of a Scotland call-up. He's obviously impressed at the lower levels there. He's been a big player for Hibs, and also probably a big loss for Hibs given how fragile they are, kind of the spine of their team. Stefan, thoughts on Ryan Porteous and him being on this list? Obviously a huge prospect, and he is still very, very young despite the injuries he picked up.
Yeah, I think kind of when you talk about Ryan Porteous, I think the most prominent issue is or for me, the thing that comes to mind initially is just almost frustration, if I'm honest with you. He is undoubtedly a hugely talented young player, and the stats bear that out even in the few games he has played this season, which was only about 17 to date. He was fourth, I think, in terms of for defenders, in terms of the interceptions per 90, so he's always shown a keen eye for reading the game. He's very active on the pitch. He's not just a kind of old centre back up the back, just marking his striker. He's a very proactive player in terms of reading the game, and that's always been one of his great strengths. And on top of that as well, what he maybe brings to Hibs that maybe there are centre backs don't have is he's got outstanding passing ability as well. Just kind of put it into perspective. His forward passing accuracy is 75%, and if you kind of break that down with like kind of top young defenders in the division, he's second only to Christopher Ajer, who gets a huge amount of praise for how he does that at Celtic, and he's not far behind Ajer at all. I think there's only a few percentage points in it. So we're talking about a young defender here who's got an excellent reading of the game. He's obviously very physical. He's got a great pace and acceleration. And his passing in terms of technical ability is superb as well. The only issue with Porteous is, as you kind of mentioned there, Neil, the fact that he does pick up injuries, and he does pick up a lot of suspensions as well. Even if this is perhaps unfair, he has become synonymous with kind of over-the-top aggressive tackles. He does seem to let the occasion get to him at times, and I do sometimes wonder if he's kind of letting the buzz get to him as well. He obviously got sent off again that Rangers game this season, and it's almost as if the kind of tension did seem to get to an extent, and that's something that it kind of strikes me as being, or says to me that he still has a fair bit to go. He also does have his issues as well. His aerial ability isn't fantastic compared to his peers in the division, which is obviously something he has to work on. But I think most of all the raw talent is undoubtedly there. And if he can obviously just get over injuries, which have become an issue for him, I think it's worth pointing out, if I'm not mistaken, he's now represented by Andy Murray's company. So he's obviously got arguably Scotland's best ever athlete there to kind of show him how to deal with the concept and the burden of promise, and how to kind of deal with that kind of attention as well, and trying to really get Neil, you could probably talk about more of this than any of us, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, Andy, he was almost a wee bit like Andy Murray, where Andy Murray did seem to have a lot of frustration, and he had a lot of emotion that he had to kind of temper early in his career.
Yeah, I think, and I was actually just going to touch on the discipline thing. I think it is something that comes with age and maturity, and I'm not saying he's immature, but he is only 21, and if you think how long it took Andy Murray to properly... He was a really angry player, and actually Roger Federer was the same. Like, both had a lot of anger in the court, and once you kind of channel that in the right way, rather than let it overcome you and kind of hold you back, you embrace it, and then it just becomes part of your game. And I think he's still got to do that. I think I think aggression's the right word. He's a really physical player, and as you say, he's not kind of someone just to sit back in the kind of 18-yard box and look after these guys. He's proactive is a very good way to put it, and people will probably think about him and crunching challenges, good or bad, but I think it's the kind of defender you want, having that aggression, that physicality, and if it's channeled in the right way, he's got a huge future, and I think he does. I think 21 for a central defender is still very, very young, and I think he's got, as much as I think the likes of Hanlon, McGregor and David Gray are all maybe coming to the end of the playing career, I think he can still learn a lot from that trio at the club. And as you say, the Andy Murray things, depending on how much he actually speaks to Andy Murray himself, but I think that's a huge thing as well, because Andy Murray had massive anger issues and still is an angry player in the court, but I think it was until he started being coached off Lendl and having the right kind of advice around him and being told how to use that kind of passion and anger that he had into playing better on the court. But with Porteous, what do you think, James? Do you agree mostly with that? I mean, do you see him still having a big future? It is worrying, obviously, it's been a couple of knee injuries he's had.
Yeah, I mean, the injuries are the most concerning thing for me, and as you say, it has been knee injuries on both of the series sort of layoffs, which is definitely not great. I mean, this season he's only played just over 1,000 minutes, which isn't loads. Last season he played 1,350 ish. So again, he needs more game time, and obviously keeping fit's the most important thing. On the discipline issue, I think it's interesting that, while I agree he's certainly he's tough tackling and pretty no nonsense, but there's maybe a bit of a misperception surrounding his disciplinary record, in that, as far as I can tell, he's only been sent off once in the league in his career, and I think that was against Rangers earlier this season when don't get me wrong, the tackle on Barisic was pretty nasty, and there's maybe been one or two occasions where he's been lucky not to have been sent off for some bad tackles, but as far as I can tell, that was his first red card in the Premiership. So I think that while he's clearly an aggressive player, and it's really important that he channels that aggression, in terms of red cards, he doesn't actually pick up loads, to be honest. And even his yellow cards, this season, he averages 0.14 per 90, so that's one every 6 or 7 games, and that's down from last season where it was about twice that. So I think that actually he is moving in the right direction with that kind of stuff. I think that obviously at times the red mist does sort of descend, but in terms of, I think it's maybe the discipline thing's maybe overplayed a bit, and I don't think that his actual disciplinary record necessarily stacks up with the perception of it.
No, that's a good point. I think as well it's maybe easy to think of him bursting balls and that tackle in particular because it's fresh in the mind, like the one against Rangers, which was particularly nasty. But yeah, it might just be like we were talking about, the way he plays. He's a tough tackler, and because of that, people maybe just have that kind of perception. But that's a really fair point.